Welcome to the Small Group Leader Podcast, a podcast by small group leaders for small group leaders to be equipped and encouraged as they make disciples for Jesus. My name is Derek Lynn, and we have been going through a 6-part series on the 6 wins of a small group leader. And on this episode, we'll be looking at the 6th win of a small group leader, the grit to keep going. We will be talking to Alex Rodriguez, the National Director for Chi Alpha, and then we will get to talk to Steve Pavek, the District Director for Chi Alpha in Alaska and the campus pastor at the University of Alaska Anchorage. We will hear about how the Lord has developed grit in him through multiple seasons of ministry and about how it's healthy for us to do challenging things with the Lord. Let's go ahead and listen to Alex's message on the 6th win of a small group leader.
Everyone who's ever led a small group knows that the people you start with at the beginning of the school year are not always the people you end with at the end of that year, which leads to this. We all have to understand win number 6, the grit to keep going. Angela Duckworth used to be a school teacher, and as a school teacher, she began to notice the difference between her best students and her worst students was not a matter of intelligence. This intrigued her to the point that she left teaching to pursue a degree in psychology, where she spent time researching the question, what if doing well in school or beyond it had more to do than just learning something easily? And this question led to researching 4 different groups of people. She went to West Point to see what candidates would graduate versus which ones would not make it. She went to a spelling bee to see which contestants would finish versus the ones that wouldn't make it. She went to the inner city schools to see which teachers had career longevity versus the ones who didn't. And she went into various businesses to see which salesmen just never quit, all while asking the question, who is successful here and why? And what they discovered was the people that impacted their organizations that were considered successful were not necessarily the smartest, or from the richest families, or had the most natural skills. What they did have in common was a grit, best described as commitment to achieving something in the future, regardless of the conditions of the present. Success, then, was discovered to have less to do with intelligence to learn something, or talent to do something, and more to do with grit to achieve something. The next question that came after this discovery was, of course, how do you develop grit? Dr. Carol Dweck from Stanford says building grit can happen through something called a growth mindset. The belief that the ability to learn is not fixed, but can change with an individual's effort. She explains when a child understands how the brain changes and grows in response to a challenge, they are much more likely to persevere when they fail because they do not believe that failure is a permanent condition. And this has everything to do with small group leading. Every small group leader fails. Every single leader fails. If you are succeeding now, just give it a while, and you will make a mistake. The more people you help become found, the more people you meet who want to stay lost, you will have your demoniacs who repent and enter into their right mind, hallelujah, but you will also have your rich young rulers who choose something over Jesus, over and over and over. Failure happens to all small group leaders. This is good news. But what makes a small group leader successful in every season is this grit to keep going, as they believe that failure is not a permanent condition. And God uses suffering to set up people for success. Please hear me. If you are failing as a small group leader, welcome to the club. That is normal. That's a part of it. What we have to understand, it's not a permanent condition. And if we can believe it's not a permanent condition, then we join the ranks of the few who have that grit to keep going. And God uses suffering like this to set up people for success. This is David at peace in a valley of a shadow of death because he knows Jesus is with him. This is Peter writing, after you have suffered, Christ himself will restore you. This is why James 1 says, those who persevere under trial receive the crown of life. This is Psalm 119, equating being afflicted to learning God's decrees. This is Jesus preaching in John 16, in the world, in small group leading, you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. God's promises of suffering do not contradict the promises of success. they actually beget the promises of success. What then is the commitment to achieving something in the future, regardless of the conditions of the present? Revelation 21, beginning in verse 3. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, come look at this. The tabernacle of God is with people, and he will dwell with people, and they shall be his people, and God himself shall be with them and be their God, and he will wipe away tears from their eyes. And there shall be no more death, or sorrow, or crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are gone. And he that sat upon the throne said, Behold, come look at this. I am making all things new. And he that overcomes shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and they shall be my people. This is the secret of the Christian's grit. This is what the Apostle Paul saw. This is what King David saw. This is what we need to see. The King of all kings is returning. And we will prepare his home by preparing our hearts, starting with our own.
Back here with Alex on the 6th win of a small group leader, wrapping up this series. It's been a fun time.
It's been good.
So the 6th win, grit to keep going. I know we are now getting to the end of the 6 wins. We're on the last one. So
That's right.
When I look at it, I could see that you could say some of these you might be able to do without the other, which you shouldn't, first off. But for example, you can hang out with your small group outside a small group without having every conversation lead to Jesus. This, however, creates friends without faith.
Yeah, that's true.
Can you do any of
That's well
these
said.
well and to the fullest without a certain amount of grit? Or is it tied to them just like at the beginning you talked about daily devotion to Jesus being completely tied to them? Is grit also kind of tied to them, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's good. I do think all the wins are interdependent. Like you said, you cannot have every conversation lead to Jesus without daily devotion to Jesus. You know, from the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. If I abide with him, I'm going to talk about him.
Yeah.
Likewise, the grit to keep going has to manifest itself in every win, because you will find seasons when you do not want to do what you need to do. This is normal for all kind of leadership, especially small group leadership. For example, daily devotion to Jesus. Sometimes, to be completely transparent, I do not want to abide.
Yeah.
I think this is true of a lot of us. When life is difficult, our human hearts are prone to run away from God instead of to him. But the valley of the shadow of death needs more Jesus, not less of him. You know, sometimes I want to be introvert. I very much rest by myself. And introverts, I just want to sit on my couch and watch football. But canceling a one-on-one does not help every conversation lead to Jesus, or be with my small group outside a small group. You know.
Yeah.
So the grit to keep going helps you do all the wins when responsibility feels more like a have to than a want to.
Yeah.
And I think that's a cyclical experience. I don't think it's abnormal for responsibility to shift from a want to a have to. Our Live Dead friends talk about this the same. They say when it comes specifically to abiding, it starts with a discipline to be with Jesus.
Yeah.
This turns into a desire, which then becomes a delight.
Yeah.
But like my friend Josh Hugendorf would say, they're cyclical. You will find your desire to be with Jesus regressing to where you have to make it a discipline again to spend extravagant time with the Lord.
Yeah.
And I think this is what the grit to keep going is. It's this discipline to keep doing things that are right when you don't want to do them.
Yeah. So looking at grit, where does it come from? Are some people just blessed with it and the rest of us are hopeless? Is it just pure repetition? Does it come from something more than just falling and learning to get back up again? Where does it come from? Or is it a mixture of everything?
I'm sure it's natural to some people, you know. I like to think that every 90s movie action star that we saw was probably natural to those guys. Granted, those are fictional characters, but you get the idea. I think there's some people that have this built-in soldierhood into them.
Yeah.
For others, Angelique Duckworth did a report on grit, and she defined it this way within her essay. It comes from the conviction that failure is not a permanent condition. And I think that's true for the rest of us. We might not have this built-in soldierhood, but if you have this conviction that failure is not a permanent condition, it gives you hope and it fills you with present tense convictions because you believe in a future tense reality. And I think that's in line with what we see in the Bible. Revelations 21 depicts this future tense reality of a new heaven and a new earth where death is no more, sin is gone, and we're governed by the theocracy of Jesus. This hope is what keeps me going when I don't think I can go any farther, because I just want Jesus to come back and for us all to go home. I would also say that grit is refueled by abiding in Jesus, who makes us more sober, and it's also refueled by obeying the Sabbath with habitual rest, which also makes us sober. So if there's a small group leader out there that's not taking 24 hours off, you're losing your rest, and therefore you're losing your sobriety, which gives you less grit and not more. So I think all three of those are a factor for us: a conviction that failure is not a permanent condition, abiding in Jesus, but also abiding with the Sabbath and having rest.
Yeah, dude, that's good.
That's what helps grit.
So how would you encourage a small group leader who's been maybe rejected, hurt, maybe knocked down a time or two and then a time again, and they're just tired and worn out, and honestly they're to the point where they don't feel like getting back up? They can just finish their classes, finish school, and they don't feel like going back out there.
I think that's a lot of us, for the record. Pete Billette would tell you at UVA Chi Alpha, he opened up with leading 2 different small groups his first year, and he successfully reduced 2 small groups into 1. So there's all of us that come across something like that. We build small groups and we break small groups. We see lost people become found, which we really, really love. We also see lost people decide to stay lost, which really breaks our heart. Furthermore, we see found people who choose to become lost, which absolutely kills our confidence. This is you putting someone through a leadership training class in the spring, they disappear in the summer, and you're wondering where your friends are in the fall, right? It happens to a lot of us. I think it's encouraging to take a look at history. Jesus had a small group member sell him out for a few bucks. He came to his own did not accept him. He endured the cross for the joy set before him, which is good news. Because it means that our salvation depended on the grit of God. That must also mean that someone else's salvation will depend on your grit to keep going, to keep finding, to keep fighting, to keep feeding. So that's what I would encourage you for, that suffering is not abnormal to this life. There's a quote that I heard a long time ago. I apologize, I can't tell you who said it. I just don't remember. But it's that if you're succeeding right now, it's because someone before you has suffered. And if you're suffering right now, it's so someone else after you can succeed. I think that's true in all aspects of life, especially in small group. If you're suffering right now, keep going so that someone else can succeed by being introduced to Jesus because of you.
So we just talked about someone who's been knocked down, trying to get them back up. What would you say to the small group leader Christian that if they were honest, they've spent some time sitting on the sideline, not yet having come into conflict with a circumstance that actually requires a lot of grit, because they may be nervous to actually put themselves in front of the fire and get hit. They might fear being rejected. They don't want to invest their life into someone who won't reciprocate it back. They aren't fully sold out for making disciples yet because they might be holding on to something else. Anything like that. In other words, they haven't yet needed grit because they haven't put themselves into a situation that requires grit from them, if that makes sense.
I would say that you can't build a muscle without breaking it. And I think what's equally true is when you look at Christianity, there is such a thing as a Christian with a crown, but it seems to come after the cross, not before. That's tough, but it's David at peace through the valley of the shadow of death. It's Peter writing in 1 Peter 5, after you have suffered, Christ himself will restore you. It's James 1 saying, those who persevere under trial will receive the crown of life. And we can take heart because Jesus himself preaches in John 16, in the world you have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. I don't think, and I fully don't believe, it's not biblical to believe that there's such a thing as a Christian without a cross. That's what precedes the crown. I think suffering in this life is not the antithesis to success. If anything, it's what sets us up for success in this upside down kingdom of the Lord. As Paul was broken, he was built. And I think as small group leaders fail, which is inevitable, and if you're a successful small group leader right now, just give it some time and you'll fail.
Yeah.
Or your people will fail. And it'll break your heart. That's part of it. That's what we do. You'll come to your own and your own will not accept you. That's biblical. That's small group leading. And my advice to you, if I'm answering your question correctly, is to have this grit, to keep going, to have this understanding that we learn Jesus more in the suffering than we do in the success.
Yeah.
That's biblical. That's the normal Christian life. And that's definitely a reality for a small group leader.
Awesome. Steve, thank you for being on the podcast.
Of course. Happy to be here.
So I wanted to ask this first. For those who may not know you or the context you're in, can you paint a picture of what ministry looks like at the University of Alaska Anchorage and how long you've been there?
Yeah, so I was called to Alaska when I was a junior in college.
Nice.
Spent a summer there, and it was 2010. That dates me, I guess. And the Lord spoke to me and said he wanted to use college ministry to impact every corner of the state of Alaska. And we've been there now for 11 years, pioneered in 2014. And my role has changed throughout the years a little bit. So I'm now still oversee Chi Alpha statewide, but also overseeing a marketplace ministry initiative that sees Chi Alpha alumni use their degrees to go plant churches amongst the 100 villages in Alaska without a consistent gospel witness. And so UA is where it's all started, and that is the campus I love. Mm-hmm. But UA is very different than a lot of places.
Yeah.
It's a commuter campus. When we got there, we discovered that only half of the students on that campus are under the age of 25.
Oh, wow.
Only half are full-time. Currently, there are only about 400 people living on campus in the dorms.
Yeah.
And so it was an interesting change in comparison to where I came from, which was North Dakota State, which is a very, very traditional college campus. So very, very different place than what we are used to.
Wow, that's crazy. So looking at this concept of grit, when you hear the phrase grit to keep going, what comes to mind from your own journey in ministry?
Yeah, I've realized that grit has been required in every single phase of my ministry journey. So at NDSU, as a small group leader, small group leading was hard, and it got hard. And people that I thought were going to be involved, or thought were going to step into leadership, or I thought were going to be faithful, there was disappointment along the way.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my first responsibility. I think my second big responsibility in Chi Alpha, I came back from Alaska, and I had this incredible missions trip experience. And I went to my campus pastor and I said, we need to do short-term trips. And he said, I don't have time for short-term trips.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what if I led it? He said, and literally, and I make fun of Brad for this all the time, his literal only advice he gave me is he said, well, Steve, just make sure you have insurance. And so as a student, it's not bad advice, but as a student, I had to navigate figuring out how to lead a missions team to Alaska. But again, the Holy Spirit used that to develop grit in my life. And then, the next big step was going on staff at NDSU. And then it was to pioneer Chi Alpha 3,000 miles away from where I grew up. And then it was leading a staff, and it was starting an internship, and then it was starting the What I Have initiative. And every single time that the Lord called me to do something new, I realized that it was an opportunity to be brought to the end of myself. Mm-hmm. And I have become, the older I get, the more I'm convinced that as soon as I'm comfortable in the calling that God has brought me to, it usually means that there's going to be an opportunity coming on the horizon to come to the end of myself again.
Yeah. That's good.
And I think we serve such a good God that he knows exactly how to bring us right to the brink.
Yeah.
To where he knows that we're going to reach a place where where we cannot do what we have to do on our own, but he'll never bring us to a place that's going to crush us.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty of the God that we serve. And so every opportunity in ministry has been on that journey.
Yeah. So being in Alaska, I think for me at least, I've either thought about Alaska in two ways, like beautiful, gorgeous Alaskan cruises, snow-topped mountains, that style of thing. Or I've thought about the people who've pioneered living in this climate that can be some of the harshest in the world, and the resourcefulness and the perseverance it takes to even live in a place so separated. So one of my questions was, what have you learned about grit from the culture and people of Alaska that you might not have learned anywhere else?
Yeah, great question. One of the things I love to do whenever something gets hard in Alaska, we're about to send a church planting team to a village. It's 400 miles away from the nearest road, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And you're equipping them to be able to live in one of these places. I always try to like bring us back to some of the first missionaries who ever set foot in this area. And the reality is that when you compare, it's all about what you compare stuff to. So yeah, if you compare living in Alaska to the comforts of living down the street from all of the people that you grew up with and your family and all this stuff, sure, like there's sacrifice involved. But when you compare it to what early missionaries did to reach many of these places, which involved putting all of your belongings on a steamship in Seattle, saying goodbye to your family, to go to a place that didn't have a mail system set up yet. And so you quite possibly were saying goodbye.
Yeah.
And going to talk to them for the last time ever.
That's crazy.
And that is what the first missionaries did in Alaska. And so when I compare it to that and I say, man, there's a lot of inspiration that I draw from that. Like, wow, this is what it took to bring the gospel here for the first time. And I would say another thing that I've learned from Alaska is that there's a beautiful reminder. Alaska is a very big on function over form as a culture.
Yeah.
So it is not uncommon to go to when you're out and about, even in Anchorage, you see a lot of Carhartt jackets, a lot of extra tough rain boots being worn. It looks like you're going to go to work.
Yeah.
And you dress like that on your way to church. You dress like that on, like there is there's not a single restaurant in the entire state of Alaska. It would be weird for you to come in there with your rain boots on.
Yeah.
And what that has taught me, the people of Alaska has taught me that function always trumps form. That's actually a beautiful, beautiful reminder about even doing ministry, that it's not about flash. It's about what is effective.
Yeah.
And I actually think that is really what discipleship is. Discipleship is not flashy. It's not the big event. It's the sitting in the trenches with individuals and doing life with people. It's the one-on-one stuff that's the conversations that maybe are never going to make it into a documentary on ministry effectiveness, but that when that disciple goes and makes a disciple who makes a disciple, we change the world.
Yeah.
And so that function over form is a beautiful reminder that I get to see every day because of the way the people of Alaska live.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. So looking at University of Alaska Anchorage, so UAA has had a large drop in enrollment over the last decade or so. And although it's something that you and your team must deal with, it's also something that you can't directly control. So my question is, how do you work through and separate out things that you can control versus things you have no control over, though both could have an equal ability to test your grit?
Yeah, great question. So I'll give you a little context for our university. So when we showed up to UAA in 2014, UAA was around 17,000 students were enrolled.
Yeah.
And 80% of those students were in person. So because of a multitude of different reasons, that number dropped over the course of the next 6 to 7 years to 9,000 students enrolled, with only 50% of the students taking in-person classes.
Wow.
It was a total change in academic philosophy and all this stuff. And so, and then, COVID closed our university for 2 whole years. We were not able to meet on campus, which surprises people. But we were, we just weren't allowed any functionality on campus whatsoever. And so things changed. And what I've realized is that as we've answering your question, how do we work through the things that we can control versus the things that we can't? Just remembering that the environment was not what we were called to.
Yeah.
It was the people.
That's really good.
And if the people is who are called, the environment doesn't actually matter. Sure, one environment might make it easier to minister or to build a ministry than another environment, but that is not nearly as important as the people that we are called. Are you a Lord of the Rings fan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought I remembered that. So there's a scene in Lord of the Rings, or if you are a mega fan and have read all the books, it's in the books. I'm a mega fan, and Frodo and Gandalf are talking, and essentially Frodo says that he wished that none of this would have happened.
Yeah. And
Gandalf looked at him and says, "So do all who live to see such times, but that is not for them to decide. All you have to decide is what to do with the situations that has been given to you." And I think that really is the way that the Lord looks at every situation. Like, listen, it's not up to you, the hand that you are dealt.
Mm-hmm.
You can't control that, but you can control the way you deal that hand, or the way you play that hand, excuse me.
Yeah.
And so making sure that you're not, I think in that season, I remember it was so easy to slip into comparison of what things used to look like or what things look like in other places. And to remember, no. This is the place and these are the people that I've been called to. This was not by accident that God has called me here. And he knew that this situation was coming. He knew all of these things, and yet the calling does not change. And so by looking at that, it allowed us to be able to just put our heads down and say, we're going to keep plowing and keep moving forward until God tells us to do something different. And even in the midst of that whole season, I remember Aaron and I sitting down and realizing, like, being real. It wasn't that we were like pretending like everything was puppy dogs and candy canes.
Mm-hmm.
We realized that, man, this is a tough season of ministry. And we made a decision that when we were going through that really big season of tumult, we realized that it was going to become very easy for us to make a decision based off of circumstance. And so we made a kind of like a pact together that we were not going to make a decision until we were kind of through this wave of craziness at our university.
Yeah.
And because we did not want to make a decision based off of circumstance, we wanted to make it based off of calling. And then the circumstances leveled out and changed. And once we knew and we were confident that we could hear the Lord's voice, then we knew that we were ready to be in a position in which we could make a decision about maybe transition or change. Yeah. And so yeah, those are the things that I learned in that season.
I love that. What does grit look like when fruit isn't immediate, when numbers aren't growing or momentum feels stalled?
Yeah, great question. So a little bit of context for us. Before we pioneered at UAA, again, we were doing ministry at North Dakota State. Yeah. And at the time, North Dakota State, man, was moving and grooving. And they still are. Like, the backup guards are doing a great job there. Shout out to them. But like, it was crazy. People were getting saved every week. And we go to UAA, to Anchorage, where nobody knows who we are, what we've done. any of the things that we've accomplished in our old ministry.
Yeah.
And here we are sitting in a living room with 14 students our first year. And there were moments in which we were incredibly celebratory of that. And then there was moments, if I could speak honestly, where the devil would come and lie and say, why are you excited about 14 students?
Mm.
And eventually I brought that lie to the Lord, which I should have done far earlier. I listened to it for far too long before I finally bring it to the Lord. And the Lord spoke something to me in that season that I will never forget. He worked me through a simple math problem. And so we're going to do some math here for just a second, if that's okay.
I'm ready.
All right.
I'm ready.
So the Lord just led my heart to ask me this question, like, Steve, how much do I love every single student at UAA? And we all know the answer. God's love is infinite, right? How much do I love every single student at NDSU? Well, you're God, you love them infinitely, right? And so this is where the math comes in, and don't worry, it's an easy math problem. What is 400 times infinity? The number of students that were involved in Chi Alpha at the time at North Dakota State. What's 400 times infinity? It's infinity.
Infinity, yeah.
And what's 14 times infinity?
Infinity, yeah.
And something, just this aha moment came. I was like, wow, our measure of success is so different in the world's eyes as it is in God's eyes. And the Lord spoke something to me in that season that I'll never forget. He said, Steve, I am far more concerned about your level of obedience than I am about your level of perceived earthly influence.
Mm.
And because every soul is infinitely valuable to me, I need you where I've called you.
Yeah.
Now the Lord grew our ministry and did amazing things, but it was that moment that allowed us to be able to, and continues to allow us to be able to disciple and train people to go and live missionally amongst people in villages, to plant churches in little villages of 400 or 500 people, believing that those 400 or 500 people are infinitely valuable to the Lord and are worthy of our pursuit. And as Francis Schaeffer says, that there are, in the kingdom of God, there are no little people and there are no little places. And when we start to look at the world through that lens, we start to realize that it's not about immediate growth numbers and metrics. Yes, those things are good and we shouldn't ignore them, but it starts from a place and an attitude of obedience.
How would you encourage someone who hasn't yet stepped fully into leadership because they're afraid of rejection, failure, or getting hurt?
Yeah, simply put, I just would say, you will get rejected, you will fail, and you will get hurt.
Yeah.
And you are in good company. And if you don't think you're in good company, look at the ministry of Jesus.
Mm.
He was abandoned by everybody he discipled in his time of greatest need.
Yeah.
Betrayed by one, abandoned by everybody else, and they went and hid in the shadows as they watched their leader die. Like, there was, you are in good company. It goes back to what I said earlier. God will always be bringing you to your brink so that you can come to the end of yourself. That does not mean that he hopes you get rejected, you hope you fail, but Scripture has a lot to say about doing things that make us uncomfortable, putting ourselves in positions in which we need to, that our faith will be tested. So, learn from your mistakes, bring people alongside of you that you are able to troubleshoot the problems you're facing with, but also know that you are building a spiritual discipline muscle through doing hard things. Throughout Paul's life as an apostle, something interesting happens. We see him refer to himself as, early on, he refers to himself as the least of the apostles.
Mm-hmm.
Later on in his life, he refers to himself as the least of the saints.
Yeah.
And then near the end of his life, he refers to himself as the chief of sinners.
Yeah.
That progression, what that tells me as a leader, is the farther I go in leadership, the farther I maybe now, quote unquote, climb in leadership, the more my self-reliance should be diminished.
Yeah.
And the more I realize, not that I have it together or I've somehow arrived, it is continually working towards a greater dependency on Jesus. And so, yeah, rejection, failure, getting hurt, all of those are opportunities to be able to step more fully into that. What a beautiful opportunity to know Jesus more and experience what he experienced.
Thank you for listening to the Small Group Leader Podcast. Our goal is to equip and encourage you as you go out and make disciples who make disciples.